Ready to go live.
Express, Switzerland. Switzerland is a country full of mountains, hilly terrain, and
I like it. Leave the volume. Let's learn.
feat was undertaken to build the Glacier Express.
Is that
This
loud enough?
railroad
Glacier
connected
Express.
the country from the west to east. But the problem was there's a mountain range in the way. Don't let the name fool you. This is hardly a fast way to travel.
Oh, dude.
On the Glacier Express.
And it is, in fact, the slowest express route in the world, taking 8 hours from end to end. But there's a very good reason for that.
One volume I had.
Welcome to America Heals, everybody. We're just kicking off, looking at something completely random and cool.
The gradient of the track never rises above 3.5%.
We're sending out some tweets that we're on. We've got Zach with us tonight. He is. We're glad to have him with us, and
miles long.
Jeff is with us tonight. I believe we might have some others join here a little bit later. So, but welcome to the show tonight. We are much apologies for not being with us
because during the winter there's only one train in each direction.
Wow.
Yeah.
Seeing that thing go into the tunnel is pretty whack too. Just like there's a lot that's gone into that. But sorry everybody for not being with us on Thursday night. It was just a crazy work week and it just couldn't happen, and that's life, and that's kind of a good thing, I think, because moving out of what's been a cold winter into a little more activity, a little more action. Hopefully that's a good thing. So everybody's staying safe, and hopefully if you can get the vaccine, you'll get it as soon as possible and all that stuff. So what is this now? Is that
I have no idea. It looks like a train track that crosses a runway. I hadn't seen
driving around.
I hadn't seen this one.
That's amazing that there would be a train across a runway.
That's what it looked like. I don't know. I didn't watch this one before. I watched just the Swiss one. Sure looks like it.
Wow.
Oh yeah, red. Red. There are the train tracks. Look at that.
My gosh, look at that.
I'm guessing they fixed it. It looks like it's in 2001, so it must have been fixed in 2001. So they can't show us live footage of it. Although that sure looks like a train going across it, doesn't it? I don't know.
That's it. All right. Sweet.
Yeah.
Anyway, welcome to the show, everybody, and welcome Zach, and welcome Jeff, and others, as we said, might show up a little bit later. Here we go. This is our 22nd episode as we go into another week. I have been doing all sorts of meetings and seminars and planning sessions in the various groups and communities that I'm in, and we've been talking about change in a lot of the planning groups that I've been involved in churches and in some other organizations. People are talking about what's going to work next when we come back. What are things going to look like when we come back? But in the air of regular people, I'm noticing something that is it's a trait. I see people having an incredibly more amount of flexibility than I've seen in the past. People have gone through the ringer in this thing, and there's, I think, a real exciting ability for people to just say, okay, if that's going to be too much work to get it going again, then screw it. Let's just do what works from now on. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that tonight. I don't know if anybody else is experiencing that. I don't know if this is a year-long response to, as we come into March, everything kind of closed down a year ago. So I'm just kind of wondering where we are on that birthday and where our heads are at, where we have the freedom to hope and start planning for some stuff to return to normal, or are we just keeping our head down, not thinking about it? So that's where I want to kick off tonight. Where are we at just in terms of life and process, So anyway.
Ironically, I'm sure Zach and I have a similar focus. My son is starting kindergarten, should be in the fall. And so I'm hopeful that by the fall, and it seems to be the way everything's moving, to try and be able to be 100% in person in the fall. So hopefully that happens. I'm sure Zach would like to be spending more time on campus.
Yeah, unfortunately, I actually got news a couple days ago that the board of trustees for the community college for my whole district. We will not be going back to in-person classes in the fall. So I'm a little disappointed about that, but life goes on, right? We found a way, like Marty said, adapting, figuring things out. So going to keep on doing that for the next semester and a half.
So, Zach, are they straight up just making essentially extending COVID protocols and saying we're just not going to try to do it?
Yeah, during the summer and the fall for next year, or for this year. Yeah.
I will say,
common thing in colleges is that happening around, because I've been hearing, a lot of other colleges that are saying, "Oh no, we'll be back," like putting that foot in the ground, going, "No, we'll totally be back." But
I think
our bishop met with the CDC people that came, and they had the virologists there, and they were like, "A, we don't know what these strains are going to do. We don't want them to spike. We don't know yet about those, and we don't know what it's going to look like to get herd immunity, and so people aren't going to necessarily be safe to go back singing in church and hugging."
right.
That's the normal. That's where people want to go back to.
From what I'm hearing a lot from my friends and people I know is that their colleges are allowing them to go to the dorms, but the actual in-person classes will not be happening. So I think that's something you might see from a lot of colleges next fall.
Okay.
It's kind of unusual. It's an unusual compromise. Why would you would think dorms would be so much worse for spreading disease than classrooms?
Yeah, I think it's partially about the money. Colleges want to be able to get that dorm money out of students, so they're allowing that.
I can imagine too, there might be things like, I don't know, just off the top of my head, foreign students or something where they're having a hard time doing it remote because their hometown is very, very far away or something like that. Just speculating.
I actually, in one of my classes, I have a friend who lives in Karachi, Pakistan. And so while it's in the middle of the day for us, it's past midnight for her. Wow. So a lot of people are having to make sacrifices to make their education work.
I will say one of the new things, we had a cold snap here. You guys, I'm sure everyone in the Midwest had a cold snap, but during that cold snap, my wife was able to reschedule everyone to remote. So she got to stay home and see all of her patients, which she hadn't really done. She'd usually gone to her office and then seen patients remotely from her office. But she was able to stay home and see the patients in their homes, which ironically, my wife's specialty is pulmonology and sleep. So she got to see things like pets in people's bedrooms and things that she might not have normally been aware of.
Wow.
So that's kind of interesting that not only did everyone get to stay home and not wreck their cars, she got to see that people had, one person had 2 ferrets in their bedroom, for example. And I could be wrong, but 2 ferrets probably fight your sleeping, Rodentia, I think are almost all nocturnal. So I would think that would be a real problem. Now, I think you could trick them by covering the cage during the day. And anyway, whatever. But anyway, it's just interesting the scenarios that have come to light. And you kind of wonder, will we ever go back? Or when we go back, will some patients just say, look, I'm 2 hours from your office. I'd rather just do it remotely. And if it can be, why not? If it can't, then, it's just interesting how things have developed and changed. Online school, for example, if we continued with that, or if we went back to in person and we decided, online worked better, we could subscribe to an online school that's not related to our school district, and we could bring our kid home and they could basically be homeschooled, but I'm sure there'll be hundreds of virtual schools now where, a private school anywhere in the country that can broadcast, your 4th grade, and you're in a classroom with people from all over the country, So the at-home model is really, my third graders really thrived in the at-home model. Now she's hitting a point now, elementary school is not like high school or college. You have the people you were in kindergarten with, you were in 1st grade, you were in 2nd grade. So 3rd grade, you're at home, but when you go back to 4th grade, it's going to be the same group of kids, more or less, plus or minus 4. So it's not the same thing as middle school, high school, where, that integration and mixing of friend groups is so important. But my 2 cents, it actually hasn't been that bad. I mean, it hasn't been fun, but I'm hopeful fall. I hope fall we'll be getting back to closer to normal. If our case numbers keep dropping, if people keep, the truth, I think, honestly, is they're not saying this on the news, but I think it's logical. There were a bunch of people that didn't take this seriously, and a bunch of them got sick. And so now they've gotten herd immunity by getting sick. And those of us that took it seriously are going to get immunity by getting vaccinated. And so those two groups now should be able to coexist with lower numbers of cases because the people that already got it by not following the guidelines have already had it. We've been vaccinated. We should be off and running, hopefully.
Well, the cultural difference that's going to happen is going to be potentially, as they're saying this, is going to be the amount of and reporting of testing and the ability to, once we get to the point of getting close to herd immunity, doing so much more testing and tracing that then you can get the number way, way, way down and then start knowing when there's an outbreak in one part of town and being able to lock it down. So we haven't been able to even talk about those kind of specifics because we lost the fight so long ago.
The only part of that model I have seen, having an elementary school kid, is they have been doing quarantines based on on risk and exposure and at the grade school level. So, their kid gets sick in a classroom, they put the rest of the classroom on quarantine, again, put them to remote school. So all of a sudden, at one point, my daughter's class went from 13 to 38 because they basically dumped an entire other class in with her. And they were in there for, I think, a week or two, and then they all went back to in-person. And so the schools have actually been able to do that contact tracing pretty well. But, of course, that's an example of, think about it. You've got a teacher for every, say, 26 kids. You've got a school nurse. You've got administration. You've got teacher's assistants. There's nowhere else in the world where you've got one person dedicated to 30 humans. So contact tracing, that's the problem with contact tracing. You do it in a city, suddenly you got 40 new cases and you need to track down 100 contacts for each of those 40 people if they'll share.
Yeah.
Suddenly it gets pretty dicey. But yes, I think if, again, as the case,
some of the stuff they're doing with the digital stuff too, where once you get in Colorado, once you use the app for your phone, and I know it's Big Brother stuff, but they're like, and I haven't had this happen, but you were in a room with a person that we now know had it, and they'll let you know. So some of that's, becoming more streamlined already.
Again, that requires people seeing doctors and using the app. And
oh, right.
Yeah. If you think they didn't like masks, I'm guessing a government app is not going to be a real popular one.
The problem with the Big Brother fear is if the government wants to track you, they have 1,000 different ways to track you.
Of course.
They don't need an app.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir, as Marty knows the metaphor.
Yeah.
I'm completely aware of it. The idea that you have any secrecy or privacy is sort of an illusion. I wouldn't have a problem using an app that shared information. I really don't. Like you say, what do I care? There's what seems to be 3/4 of the Republican Party probably would have a problem with it at this moment, which is just mind-boggling.
Yeah. It's unreal. It's unreal. Tim, how you doing?
Hey guys, how you doing?
Good, man.
See ya. Happy Sunday night. All right.
Yeah.
Happy Sunday night.
This is like your guys' Friday night, huh? After getting done on Sunday.
I know.
A little bit.
Right?
I don't know.
Yep.
I lean into the week early. I quit towards the end of the week. I peter out about Thursday afternoon, and then I just show up on Sunday.
I was going to say, I thought Sunday's game time.
It is, yeah. But it's sort of like it's sort of like being a starting pitcher. I don't let my family talk to me in the morning. I'm a real asshole before worship and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Are you like
too.
dancing
I'm
down
so
the hall in a
glad.
boxing robe? Are you like,
you got to take it that seriously, man?
Yeah.
Because
You gotta pull your hoodie on in the morning. You eat your cereal like this. You just don't.
Hey, Dad, what's going on? Shut up.
I'm thinking about. I'm working right now. I'm thinking.
I'm hulking out on Jesus. Eat your cereal.
I'm about to stand in front of a bunch of people and do this. Here we go.
I don't even. Sunday's the one day I don't even eat breakfast. I'm just like, screw it. I don't want to connect with people. I just want everyone to leave me alone. So I drink some coffee and I'm just gone. It's like, I love you guys. Bye.
Wow.
So that's how intense.
Oh, man.
It is. Yeah.
Wow. You can get a bad place with no breakfast, just coffee.
And then talking for 3 hours.
I've done that like Moby Yard and come in like I'm about to fall over off the empty stomach and caffeine dump.
I don't want to derail anybody, but I have the opposite worry where sometimes if I do eat and then I go and I'm talking for 3 hours, my stomach and my digestive system start doing crazy stuff. So I'm like, I'm just better off just not even messing with it.
I have a nervous bladder. Like anytime right before showtime, it's like I gotta go hit the bathroom. Right before I do any kind of show, work in a fraternity, whatever. It's like, okay, we got 3 minutes. I'm gonna go hit the can. It's every time.
Wow.
This is the equivalent kickstart to a show as having a fucking train track on an airport
Airport
Trying to
runway.
say a
That's right.
runway. An
We're
airport
trying to get
runway.
a train. We're sneaking a train under the planes right now.
That was our opening graphic.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, there's actually a train track going sideways on a runway.
Yeah, perpendicular to a train track to a runway.
No.
Yeah.
I'm guessing it was a situation where there was just no way to avoid it. It's like the flat spot on the peninsula, and they just had to put a runway there. So
Well,
it
I
was
think
all
trains get right of way for all things, to be honest. The train was probably there first.
That's kind of like a pedestrian, you know. It's like they might not have right of way, but it's always illegal to hit them. You know what I mean?
It's always illegal to hit them. Man, I lived in Boston. That's a true thing. You lived by that, you know.
I mean, I could be wrong, but I think that's the way the traffic law is written. It's like they have the right of way at the corners. You're supposed to absolutely stop for them a crosswalk. But anytime you hit a pedestrian, you're at fault. So
yeah, it's your fault. Totally.
So it really
totally.
right of way isn't really useful if you just hit a pedestrian. You're already going to go to jail.
Oh, man.
It was a big deal when like less than 100 people died in Boston from getting run over in a single summer. They were like, "Hey, we made it to less than 100 this summer."
Wow, that is terrible.
That was like
terrible.
a special on the news. Yeah.
Was that before the Big Dig? Did the Big Dig drop those numbers, or was that after?
Yeah, that was during the Big Dig. I think there were a lot of angry people who were just like, "It's been years." They just stopped caring about pedestrians. I've got to get through this intersection. Plump, plump, plump. I'm still driving. I don't care.
Boston has definitely lost its luster in the last few years. You know, I used to think Boston was a grand old town, and boy, it just seems like the more I learn about Boston, the less I like it.
They've been hit hard by winters, boy, these last couple years. Last year they had ice mounds, or last year, the year before, they had ice mounds so big that they still were like giant frozen mounds of dirt in the summer. They're like, that corner used to be there, and now there's just dirt reflecting the heat from whatever, and it just didn't go away. It just stayed. That's how bad it was.
I've seen that stuff.
So
the Ghetto Glacier.
So we were talking earlier about change, Tim.
Yeah, man.
And talking about adaptive, and I just want to throw this out because you'll know where this is going. But there's a sort of a book that a lot of change folks are reading, leaders have read. It's called Canoeing the Mountains, and if you haven't read it, it's worth reading. I don't know if you guys have read it or not, but the core to the book talks about the Lewis and Clark expedition and how and I'm not going to go deep into it, but I want to lay this out there. When the Lewis and Clark expedition was set upon, there had been from the cartographers who wrote maps, from the very first explorers, there was a foundational belief that the sun is coming up tomorrow, that there was a waterway through the North American continent to the Pacific Ocean. Every person alive had an assumption. And so historically, it's important to understand that when Lewis and Clark were heading out and they were cruising up the Missouri, and they go into Mandan, and then they cruise over and they get up to the Continental Divide, all of a sudden they're like, oh shit, there's no more river. There is no waterway. And so the reason that this is something people talk about is they had to go from being flatlanders who had this assumption to getting past their original bias in a hurry so that they didn't die, and then begin an adaptive change into, holy shit, now we have to figure out how to get our gear up and down these mountains. We got to build some bridges. We got to cross rivers. We got to walk on foot. We got to make it through a winter. All sorts of other skills were necessary than they ever thought they'd need. So when you're going through an adaptation, those who are successful are the ones who can sort of the quickest, recognize, oh shit, we're walking now, or we are in a different vehicle now, or whatever. And so, but there's one final piece that the book teaches very clearly, is that as with the core of discovery, you don't succeed once you go through the adaptation. You all start, going along, but you don't succeed until you get past the mutiny. And there's a whole sort of piece about the process of, you will have mutiny. You will have betrayal. You will have people who will try to kill your fucking progress in a real adaptive change, and that's that's the way healthy systems, healthy families, healthy practices, healthy habits keep going. Because we've always done it this way. Fuck you, and then they stop the change. So I lift this up because I'm dealing with this in church stuff, and the other people are dealing with it in the remake of their business as they go through these changes. We're watching politically. I want to bring this back to some politics. Watching Mitch McConnell this week crawl back into his shell and say that he would support Donald Trump in 2024 after just a few weeks ago potentially giving light between them it's an indicator that we still live with a political population that refuses to go forward in the adaptation process. They still deny their role in the COVID debacle. They still want to pretend that Donald Trump is relevant. They still want to believe that somehow there's a big lie. They want to play in a bubble.
Right.
The bubble's been popped.
Right.
So that's my speech, but I just want to lift that up to kick us off tonight because change is hard and it takes courage, and you also are going to get the shit kicked out of you when you make change. It's going to happen.
Well, just let me jump in really quick and say one of the early things that we talked about was how you approach change. If you approach change from a combative standpoint and your goal is to just go out and force people to see your point of view, like a no masker,
Mm-hmm.
It's not a big deal around here. Other places, like where my folks live, some people go into stores without their mask and they just look at people like, I dare you to say something to me, and they're trying to force their view on other people through confrontation. That's confrontational. The other way, I guess, is to be what we're talking about, which is healing, which is like where you engage. So you're going out and you're engaging in change for a reason. You're not just trying to force your own view. You're trying to meet in the middle and exchange views. And then there's also just like a generous approach, which is like Jesus's approach in one way, which is like you don't judge anybody, you love everybody, you're willing to confront evil and corruption and obstacles, but at the same time you do it without making people feel like they're your enemy. But moving forward for change is absolutely necessary, but I think how you go out, what is your mission to go out? Why are you seeking change in the first place is critical to how you go about doing it.
Sure, but the change has been thrust upon us. We're living in a fucking earthquake zone, and the ground has moved under our feet, and there are some among us, many in power among us, who would like to just say, no, it didn't move.
Right.
Nope. That didn't happen, Marty. There wasn't
I don't know if you heard, but Pence and Trump have made up as well. So it's not just Mitch McConnell, it's also Pence.
Did they tongue kiss?
I don't believe there's ever recorded a rift. I mean, we obviously assume there was a rift, but
I mean, I would say there's probably a rift when someone sends a mob to kill you, right? There was probably some ill feelings.
I mean, kids in cages didn't do it. Lying about sleeping with 2 women while his son was 3 months old didn't do it. I mean, I don't know. You and I aren't the same as Mike Pence.
Mother watched.
I mean, we had somebody, he's actually back. He came back in. He hasn't said anything. We had somebody come in here who claims that there were more votes than registered voters. We all know.
Well, that person can't count. He said there were only 130 million that voted or some shit. There's 170 plus million registered.
Obviously. Everyone doesn't vote even in the last election. No, they're all just making it up.
Just shaking it.
They take things like four-year-old voter counts against.
The other piece. I had a friend call me the other day, sort of a Trump guy, and he was telling me about all the research he does.
Oh
And I
yeah.
asked him straight up, and I think this is a fair question, man, and I didn't do it at this exact time. I kind of waited a little bit, but I read a lot for my job. I read hundreds of pages of shit a week, all kinds of stuff. Students read 1,000 pages a week, right? That's part of life. People on their phones read. But for the folks who are doing the research, my question is, how many pages are you reading a day?
That's not the kind of research they're doing, Marty.
I understand, Jeff, but if you're not reading books, if you're on the internet looking for this bullshit and you're not reading books about things that are part of a larger part of life, stuff that sometimes applies and sometimes doesn't, you're not developing as a critical thinker.
Mm-hmm.
You're fucking around, and you're trying to build that bubble again.
Their research is obviously just fancy word for groupthink.
Yep.
You should be group thinking more. You should be listening to my group of friends. You should come watch the YouTubes I watch. You should see the books I read, which of course are actually PowerPoints or Word documents or whatever. Mm-hmm. And they all just circle around, and they all take their information and they tick it just a little bit closer to their bias. And by the time it makes all the way around the circle, it comes back with Democrats eat babies. I mean, that's how you end up with Democrats eat babies. It's a think tank with only one direction, which is the left sucks. And so, and it's obvious. It's obvious with the output of what their research gives them. It's complete nonsense. And you ask them, well, how can you pin that to something rational, like you're saying? Can you pin that to a book? Can you show me that in any kind of a justifiable source? I mean, anything that isn't PerezJohnson.net. I mean, can you find an article in anything that has any editorial responsibility? Oh, you can't. It's exhausting. Like right now, I actually have it here. Someone was arguing that Biden's caused the problem with gas prices.
You want me to bring this up?
Yeah, sure. I did a quick bit of math today. This is some research. It's the kind of thing you could do real easily. This comes directly from the EIA.gov, the Energy Information Administration. This is the average gas price for I don't even know how long they go back. Let's see, all the way back to 91. So
this is it. Whack, dude! It dropped me all the way out of the app, and I'm back. That's so crazy.
Good. That's weird because I think it just flickered in the corner of my eye. So this is the chart of it. This is gas price per month, and I put a couple months of Obama in there just so you could sort of show. So right now we're at $2.50. That's lower than 25 months of Trump's presidency. The average under Trump was $247.66 because there was this real low spot. Low spots.
Wait. You've lost me. What the fuck are we looking at here?
This is average price of gas. February, January, December, November, October. This table is available off of EIA.gov.
Gotcha.
So it's every single month. You can download it as a data file, no problem. Then over here, I'm counting if it was higher or lower than current price. And there's 25 that were higher. And the average under Trump was $247 versus $248 versus $250 now. So basically the same price. So here it is as a chart. Only the last data point is Joe Biden. Only this very last data point, because he's only had 1 month of information, February. And if you do it, I did inflation. What do you guys use for inflation per year? I use 3%. Is that what you guys like? Zach, do you have a better number?
I don't know if 3% is accurate. There hasn't been that much inflation over the past couple decades.
How about 2?
2 would make more sense. I mean, you could make an argument that there's less than 1%, but
okay, how about 1%? So at 1%, it should be 330. It should be 237 right now. So we're not even far above the inflation based on where Trump received the gas price. So we're like 13 cents over inflation right now. We're not, you know what I mean? Like nothing's really out of whack. The point being, this chart's always going to slightly creep up due to inflation, right? It fuels an economy is a commodity object. It's like gold or anything else. It's going to stick with inflation at some point. Anyway, long story short, gas prices were higher under Trump. 25 out of his 48 months, which isn't hard to tell, is over half. And yeah, right now it's ticking up. Now, again, someone who's studied more economics than me, the main driver of price is supply and demand, right? So when we were locked down in April and May of 2020, the gas price hit a rock bottom because nobody was buying it. We all remember those days, right? Mm-hmm. it went under $2.
Right.
Well, as we go back to normal, it's obviously going to tick back up until it's somewhere in this range, running along at what it was doing. So it's just not rocket science for these conservatwits that don't want to do the work.
And I would challenge any conservative to point to the specific policy that has led to
in 1 month
increase. Yeah, what policy has Biden done that led to this?
Yeah. And if you go on TikTok, this chart created by other people, I didn't take any of their charts. They're all pointing at it because there's always people crying about gas prices. The only real good news I can say is for gas prices to be people's big concern about Joe Biden. First of all, that's absolutely the tail wagging the dog. Gas prices has always been one of those, but gas. The president doesn't control the gas price. Second of all, how great that the biggest concern they have is that Biden's changed the gas price.
That means they got nothing. So
they got nothing.
I saw a statistic tonight that we're at 95 million doses have been distributed. 75 million are in arms at this point. So figure that's half, so 35 million people. So we're going to pass the 100 million mark in 100 days, as Joe said. In fact, we're going to blow it out of the water. And now we got the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which doesn't have as high of an efficacy rate on the top end, but they say it has an absolute 100% not gonna die from COVID.
Yeah.
Or go to the hospital with a severe case.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. Yeah, and there's also saying that it was tested in some of the hotter spots in the world where the other one wasn't. I'm not really smart enough to judge Johnson & Johnson's versus the other two. I will say that 100 million shots in the arms was the goal, which would be 50 million people. I think you're right. I think there's a pretty decent chance he'll get 100 million people vaccinated, so double his goal. Yep. And when you start thinking about it, when you start getting these numbers like 100 million people vaccinated, I mean, depending on what number you use, if there's 360 million people in the United States, that 100 million people vaccinated is a pretty huge number. I don't know what percentage of people get the flu vaccine every year, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's less than 100 million people. So you're starting to get into some pretty important numbers. So between the people that have contracted it, unfortunately, is what, in the 30 million range right now. Plus you have 100 million people vaccinated. We're going to start getting into some very interesting territories with the statistics very quickly. And that's exciting.
I think this was politically calculated to aim for a goal that was lower than what Biden could actually do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that's classic. I mean, I'm sure you've learned this in school. It's under promise and over deliver. You should. And I mean, in real life, you generally try and in business, someone will say, well, how many can you do? You tell your boss 120, you do 119, you get a pat on the back. But especially in politics, if you think you can do 120, you say 100, and then you dunk those last 19 as it exceeds expectation. But
and then I think there's another piece to this that we need to, because everything has been happening so fast and there was an impeachment going on, we really didn't take the 2 weeks to listen to how scandalously unprepared and how little stuff had been ordered and was ready for the vaccine rollout. Like, we all just had to kind of swallow that shitty news and keep moving on with the Trump train craziness. But we should maybe go back and just realize that look on Joe Biden's face and the other faces of the people that were working for him. I mean, they were like, we didn't know it was this bad, and so we got to do it all. Like, it was a sense of complete despair you could see that day. And so there is something good about starting from nothing, though. At least you're like, fuck, all right, here we got to start from, there is nothing. It's not going to get worse than this. So
and don't forget that they were supposed to have a reserve.
That's what I mean. There was
waiting,
nothing.
And there was no reserve. I mean, I've heard anywhere from 60 million to 100 million doses that they were supposed to have, that they claimed they were holding a reserve for the second shot of all the people who received those. It was not there. I mean, it just wasn't there. We don't talk about it much, but that was a pretty.
And then we cut a deal to purchase. The Biden administration cut a deal to purchase enough vaccine for the entire country, because that hadn't been done, because when Trump had the opportunity, he didn't do it. So this has all been a month and a half, I was going to ask Zach too, because, we started out early on in this thing looking at the left and the center and all that kind of stuff. I know there are some places where it's been maybe not everything you've wanted, but hasn't this been a pretty progressive administration so far?
I would say it's miles ahead of Donald Trump. right? So this is by far the best month we've had in the past 4 years, in my opinion.
Do you think
Is
it's
it
been more progressive than Obama?
to an extent? Yeah. I mean, I don't think
I do.
Obama got near a $1.9 trillion deal, right?
Right.
Yeah, they couldn't force anything through either. I mean, right now we have Kamala as the tiebreaker if they want to push something all the way through, and I don't think that Obama had that.
Well, Obama had a super majority in his first 2
He
years.
did. He
Yeah,
could
but I
have.
mean,
Yeah.
in terms of like a giant during the recession, he tried to push that giant package through, and then by then we didn't have the supermajority anymore, and he couldn't push it through. And according to my memory, I could be way off.
Well, what I know is that Joe called this shot in the campaign. You know, nailed it right away, and what we saw is it's coming to fruition. It's taken a little bit of time to write the dang bill.
It's only in the House.
You know,
It's only in the House, and it has that minimum wage part that's probably going to be a pretty serious problem.
Yeah, the minimum wage is something that I think you've probably heard a lot of progressives, including myself, are disappointed that it's not in there, ranging from disappointed to angry. And the reason why a lot of us are feeling this way is we believe this is the only chance Joe Biden's going to get to pass the $15 minimum wage unless he gets rid of the filibuster. But then getting rid of the filibuster requires Joe Biden being able to get both Sinema and Manchin on his side, which we don't know if that's going to happen. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and that's why there's a lot of frustration right now.
It's my understanding it's still in. It's just the parliamentarians said it can't be. So there's discussion about whether they submitted against the parliamentarians' rule, which I would theoretically pull back some votes.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on if that's going to pull back votes. What I do know is that the CBO, Congressional Budget Office, did say it would affect the federal budget. So there's differing opinions coming out of Congress itself, not just politicians. So we'll see what happens.
It'll be interesting to see. I guess that the minimum wage is probably a topic for a whole nother day. That's a whole
I
big
don't know.
bite.
I think it's going to be a question that, I mean, are we getting to a point? This is important. Are we going to get to a point where our further left progressive friends are not going to be able to celebrate this victory with us if we win this 1.9? Are we going to hear tears and anger from the left because it wasn't enough? I'm just curious about that, you know?
You know, I can't speak for the entire left, right? That goes with the given.
Could, man.
Come on, man.
No, I
Just call a meeting real quick. Right? Just call a meeting real quick and see what they have to say.
Just tell the left.
Yeah.
What I will say is every person is going to be happy that something got done, but you're never going to move the needle if you don't keep fighting for and arguing for what you want, right? The squeaky wheel gets the oil. Mm-hmm. So if progressives don't get everything we want, we're going to say thank you for doing what we did want. Now do everything else that we wanted. I think that's just the nature of politics, right?
And that's my hope. That's what they should say. That's what I say. If $15 an hour doesn't happen now, I would like to talk about parity, which is a concept that nobody wants to talk about. And also, I would like to talk about a $15 to $20 minimum wage, because the actual minimum wage should be about $25. What people don't know or forgotten is that in the 1980s, there was a purposeful policy decision made to break our unions and privatize our workforce. And what that did was it made a billionaire class. We now have billionaires. We didn't have billionaires in the 80s. We didn't have in the 70s. We didn't have them. There was like 2 or 3, and they weren't really around. Now we have billionaires. We have an oligarchic system. And if one of the things you're hearing, if you watch any sort of CNBC or any economic stuff, they talk about Congress. These billionaires and these business guys, they talk about Congress like it's a gnat in the air that you just swat away and get the hell out of my way because I'm doing something in the world that I want to do. And that we have that we've given that over, this sort of mythic thing to we have the freedom to make $1 billion, which means I then don't have to abide by the rules anymore. And the corruption, I kind of feel like this first play by Joe was such a good move. It's like a great coach will come into a national championship game with the first 25 plays laid out, and they don't change no matter how much their gut makes them throw up, or what if the first 3 passes get picked off, they just fucking stick with their plan. And I think this was that for Joe and his campaign and the new governance of getting a cabinet put in place. But I think that the year will start to push back and start to define the issues. I think starting with the transgender issue was really smart for the left, for Joe, for whoever and however this thing has been pushed into the forefront, because it's such a wonderfully divisive issue, and it's an absolute justice issue that needs to not be something that's scandalous. It needs to be dealt with and cauterized into law forever. And of course, it's going to suss out all of the fear mongers of people who are looking for something to be scared of for the sake of their clutching their pearls and their honor.
Yeah, the trans issue, as I called out, I don't know what that was, a week and a half ago, that was going to be a big hot button issue. And of course, looks like some states passed some laws against it. Now the Congress is passing laws to support trans rights. So I guess it's a chicken and egg, as I suspected. It'll be hard to tell exactly who started it. But I didn't get a time to get the list together. But I was just thinking in my head, if you guys all remember, when I was in college in the 90s, I believe it was Colorado for some reason. Correct me if I'm wrong, Marty. They were one of the first states to make it illegal to do hate crimes on homosexuals.
Yeah.
So Colorado took a progressive step of saying, if you are targeting people to beat them up because they're homosexuals, that's illegal. That was a progressive topic in 1996, whatever year that was. So we go back there, and I'm sure we could find the arguments that were against that. Obviously we've all heard on Late Night on Scope that there's no such thing as a hate crime. You still hear that dumbass argument.
Right.
So the point is, you can go back, you could go way back. I mean, every now and then I bring up whites only signs and stuff, but let's not go too far tonight. You start somewhere in the 90s, it's not okay to beat up people because they're gay. And then you had gay marriage that, in my mind, was banned by conservatives and then eventually overturned. We spent, 10 years on that? Mm-hmm. We keep going, then making, I happen to know a couple who didn't even adopt, by the way. They did an insemination, but the non-caring mom had to be interviewed by the state to be a legal guardian to her newborn daughter. That was a few years ago. They didn't have to do that with their son. That was more recent. So we've drudged our way through these issues one by one by one by one, and here we are at trans. I believe the federal bill, if I'm not mistaken, is we're talking about making trans a protected class across the globe, right? Like, that's to say, including sexual orientation, transgender. These are all protected, just like being a minority class, senior citizen, right? It's the idea is to create them as part of the protected class. Did I miss that, or is it not quite that strong? It's just saying that there has to be a minimum bill of rights for these people.
I'm not sure.
Either way, the Congress is trying
trying
to say, let's not discriminate based on being transgender. And of course, the Republicans now are slamming back. They're going to use athletes. I would suspect soon, if not already, they're going to bring up children, and they're going to start putting up these walls and putting up these objections about, I'm sure, traditional values. I'm sure they'll talk about the Bible, because they just have to go to the Bible. And I guess what I'd really ask is, did any of those arguments help us at all with gay bashing or gay marriage? Or, in other words, weren't all these same arguments just destructive and delayed what was really the right decision all along? So why does anyone listen to these people when they come back out of their cave and start slinging their bullshit about how, whatever, you can't decide your gender or whatever? Well, you said people couldn't decide their orientation either, and they did. They do. They exist. Homosexuals exist. Transgenders exist. Get over yourself. You don't dictate what other people do. And by the way, this is the party that's supposed to be pro-liberty. So you're pro-liberty, but if you think you're a woman trapped in a man's body, you should just stay there? That doesn't seem very liberal. That doesn't seem liberated. And the federal government now is going to do what? They're going to do gender assessment inspections on high school athletes? That's liberty? Yeah. I mean, where do they think this all goes? The trans bathrooms is bad enough. But these people
Jeff,
just keep dragging us down. Go ahead.
that almost sounds like pedophilia, is it not?
It almost
Sure,
does.
It almost
Right?
does. It almost does. It almost does. And by the way, do we remember when how trans bathrooms went? Does anyone remember all the cases we saw of trans bathroom violations? There were men going into women's bathrooms asking relatively masculine-looking women if they were really women. And, of course, they all were women. They just happened to be a softball coach with short hair or something, whatever her fashion decisions are. So that's the only people I know that break any gender bathroom rules are these idiots that think it's their job to enforce bathroom rules. And guess what? Lots of companies are really smart, and they said, you know what we're going to do? We're just not going to have men's and women's bathrooms. We're just going to have bathrooms. And then people can use whatever bathroom they choose. And so that's a better solution all the way around, by the way. You get smaller bathrooms, you let people lock them, and let's just all go on with their lives. Let people do whatever they want in the bathroom. But I just scratch my head like when were the conservatives ever right on one of these issues? What was the last issue like this, social progress, that conservatives argued against and it turned out they were right? Can anyone name one?
That's a great question.
I mean, what is it?
By nature, they're regressive, right? Like
Right.
as time goes on, they're always going to be proven wrong.
It's just mind-boggling how you can just always be behind the curve and be so proud about it. And as I've said before, I think it's a huge mistake because we have two big problems in the Conservative Party. They have two big problems. Yes, you have the Proud Boy, crazy, chauvinist, sexist pigs. Mm-hmm. Congratulations, we all knew they were there. But you also have these young conservative Republicans who have gone to school with people in all these special groups, and they respect them and they understand them and they're not mad about them. Second of all, these as rights have gone up, we now know that our neighbor's son is gay. We now know that our neighbor's now has a daughter who is transitioned. We know these people because as their rights have come up, they've become more obvious and more apparent and more free and more liberated. So you're messing with people's neighbors, children, family. It's not like back when we were talking about gay bashing, when that was some small group of guys in downtown Denver that were getting beat up. Right. We all now know that we have friends everywhere that are homosexuals, and we've all come to understand that as the reality of the world. We don't fight it anymore. We accept it, right? We're excited about it. I mean, I don't know. I happen to have a homosexual member of my band. Well, I love her. She's my best friend right now.
The issues are critical, but I think just the whole movement it's the language that I've been reading about. It's this idea of and it can grow into wildfire and potentially maybe be a bad thing, but the ethic of neighbor justice, that if my neighbor that's a person over here is feeling like they're bullied because of a fucking system that is bullying them, whether it's people that are behind it or whether it's whatever decisions have been made beforehand or whatever, if their life is being impinged because of that and they can't be themselves, then it's my role as a person who wouldn't want that to happen to me to at least lean into seeing that changed for them.
Yeah.
That's not really even a liberal position. Maybe it is. Maybe it's exactly a liberal position, but it's just like, to me, we've moved past some of these things. We've learned that every time we integrate, while there are people who are scared to do it and don't like to change, it's better every single time. Every single time we allow new people to be included in the pie of the American dream, it's better every single time.
Every time. Because it's not a zero-sum game. Everyone brings something to the table. Except for, of course, for example, all the white people on unemployment. I mean, the truth is, the biggest problem is rural. I mean, honestly, rural white people are a huge drain on our economy because there's not many jobs out there.
Yep.
And so there's a lot of people on unemployment in rural white America, but they want to talk about everybody else. They don't want to talk about that because they live where there aren't any jobs.
Are they on welfare?
Yes.
Long-term welfare happening?
Yeah. And of course, if you're unemployed long enough, there's all kind of different types of disability you can file for. You can file for emotional, having an emotional disability and file for disability, or whatever. And by the way, I think those systems should be there. I'm just saying it's ironic that those people
in Denver with significant depression and they're on public assistance.
It's just
not a great.
These people are voting against their own best interests. It's just mind-boggling. But I don't know. I just find this whole thing just crazy. And I mean, you'll all interact. I'm in a group that's all dads married to doctors, right? So you'd think these guys are all married to doctors, and someone will come on there and say, my son won't be gay. I've taught him it's wrong. And I'm like, you better be joking. You know, you're just like, you can't, it's not under your control. And all you're going to do is make a depressed teenager if they happen to be gay. Like, you can't do that to people. You gotta,
or you're making a bully too.
well, and truthfully, there's chicken and egg. I think repressing anybody is bad. I think when you take a teenager and tell them that they can't be something, I could be wrong, but reverse psychology kicks in and they want to be something even more. Not saying that you can create a gay person that way, but I think there's an idea there that you could accidentally become a motivating factor to someone to become abnormal by saying, you know, you're normal, you know, and then they start thinking, I don't know, they're obsessed with the naked body of the opposite sex. They think they're not normal and they freak out. Or conversely, you force somebody to normalize behavior that normalized to your model, their say sexuality, and then they end up being an unhappy adult, or they don't survive into adulthood because they're so depressed from being repressed. So these people, everyone, there's just the whole right side of this country just doesn't seem to be able to understand a simple concept like what I just described. I mean, if your child's gay, do you want to have a happy, healthy child, or do you want to bash them into submission until they are either unhappy for the rest of their life or in their life? I mean, those two things that's not great. But
to what you're talking about, when Marty and I were in seminary, we took a class that was really ahead of its time. And it was looking at the mental abuse of conversion therapy. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it was
they were just starting to, there were some PhD students who were just really getting into breaking that shit down at that time. And that was pretty scandalous new stuff. They were like, look what happens to the brain when this goes down. It's really crazy.
And to your exact point, it's like these people aren't being converted, they're being depressed, and they're living depressed, unhappy lives. That's not success.
No, that's not success. It's not success at all. And someone said something about things being difficult to explain to kids. You know, the truth is, things are always more difficult for adults than they are for kids. Kids have no problem with these concepts.
Right. I mean, if you actually look at the numbers, younger Republicans are far more accepting of these social issues than the older Republicans are. So if you're just thinking of like the long-term strategy of the Republican Party, being anti-LGBT is not good for you because the youth base of the Republican Party does not agree with you anymore.
And there's an old saying from a teacher that said, you don't know anything until you can explain it to a child and make them understand it.
Sounds right.
Right. Exactly. And I was just reading something the other day about the Greek art of argument and of debate, and that a great debate argument had to have both pathos, logos, and ethos. The pathos is the heart or the feeling. It had to make you feel something. When you go and see a movie that makes you cry, that's a pathos. They did that on purpose, and you're the person that they made cry because they know how to make you cry. Ethos is what's right. You have to be able to tell people what's right. And then the logos is logic. You have to be able to explain it logically. In our culture, most of the political argument that happens is only the logistical piece. The ethic of what's right on the Republican right has left. There is no more ethic discussion. They can't have them. It's fascinating to watch how they simply can't go there.
I mean, you brought up Mitch McConnell. Nikki Haley's reversed herself over a couple weeks. Yeah. Ted Cruz is absolutely my golden child right now. I just love him to death because he says, we didn't cover this on a show. I think I covered this on my own scope. He started off with, my kids' friends invited us to Mexico. I went down to drop them off. Then he said, well, I was scheduled through the weekend. Then it was, I dropped them off and came back early. Turns out it was their plan to have people come down and meet them in Mexico. He, on a radio show, blamed the text messages being released on his Democratic neighbors. If you haven't heard that one, that's well worth the read. He even said in that interview, some of my Democratic neighbors had Beto signs in their yard, and I found that distasteful. Now think about the ego on a U.S. senator who, by the way, won, that some of his neighbors supported his opponent. I mean, this is a democracy, Ted. Anyway, he does all this. he gets back from the airport. He says, I had regrets the moment I sat on the plane. By the way, flies out in a gray mask, flies back in a Texas mask. I think that's very interesting. So all this stuff, he kind of eats like half a crow, kind of just says, well, it wasn't the best decision making. Then he goes to CPAC. I have it as one of my clips. It's actually not on top right now.
Okay.
I can play it here in a second because
You want me to pop it up here?
It's just delicious. Yeah, go ahead. He goes to CPAC, and he decides to just nullify all of his concern, all of his cajoling, completely just pisses on all of his excuses. You guys ready?
God bless CPAC.
Little cheap heat.
I gotta say, Orlando is awesome. It's not as nice as Cancun. But it's nice.
I mean, so he ends this trifecta of just crap with
I want more, Ted.
You want more, Ted? I got another Ted for you. Ready? This is another one that really. What is his point? What? Think freshman speech. What is the point of this section of his speech?
Can I just stop and say how strange the rules are right now? I want to understand how this virus works. So when you walk in, you got to put your mask on. Sadly, I've got two. You walk in, you got to put your mask on. You sit down, you take your mask off. See, apparently the virus is actually connected to elevation. No, remember, this is about science. It's actually, it may not be elevation. I think it's that there are hormones that are released in your thighs when you're sitting.
All right.
So you can sit at the table and there's
My
no
grandma
virus.
died. You're horrible.
But if you stand up, put the mask on. And let's be clear, this is a dangerous virus. But these collectivist statists, okay, now they're saying everybody can get immunized. We can have herd immunity everywhere, and we're going to wear masks for the next 300 years. And by the way, not just one mask, 2, 3, 4. You can't have too many masks. How much virtue do you want to signal?
I fucking can't do it anymore, man.
That was pretty much the end of his one-liners. Masks for 300 years. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 masks. How much virtue do you want to signal? This is from Ted Cruz, who coming back from Mexico wore a Texas flag mask. I mean,
he bailed on his constituents when they were dying and freezing to death. He's like, we got to go someplace warm, baby. Let's go.
This is just the lying aspect of what he did. Yes, he also fled his state while people literally were dying because the infrastructure collapsed. While, by the way, this man's favorite rep, AOC, raised millions of dollars for Texas and went to Texas to help fix it. And Joe Biden went to Texas to help see what he could do.
Yep.
You know, I really believe that in his speech that he wrote for CPAC, he penciled in pause for laughter. He paused and no one laughed like multiple times. You could see it.
Yeah.
I love that. That's
He's
the
just
only
out of
delicious
his
part
mind.
of the whole thing.
He's like on a rampage of craziness. And it's like Trump flipped these guys, and I don't know what happened to them, or if they're living in such a weird panic where they're like binge drinking at night just to try to get to bed, and they're getting up. I don't know what's going on with these people, but I do know this. This wouldn't be happening if we didn't have unlimited money in politics. Right. What we literally have right now is one party that's far too insular and whatever to fall out of sorts in this fashion. So the Democratic Party is still chugging along, in many ways as inept as ever. But the Republican Party, because of these lack of changing on so many little social issues along the way, they've just not changed for so long. They've created this bubble for themselves. And now it's like the only reason they can keep playing along with this really bad cast of characters. We would have never seen Donald Trump if it wouldn't have been for money in politics. We wouldn't see Ted Cruz. because you would look at that person and you'd be like, dude, you have some things in your life you need to work on. Before
Right.
you're going to be my leader, I'm going to go ahead and recognize that you should maybe go to a doctor. And then you should maybe talk to a therapist because you don't make fucking sense.
Well, historically, they also would have said we have a real problem, which is you don't seem to have a platform, and the Republicans have a very strong platform. Historically, in the primary, what the candidates get weeded out by is how well they apply to the platform. Trump had no platform. They went for pure personality, ditched their platform, and here we are 4 years later with absolutely no Republican platform. And Ted Cruz, by the way, who we all remember, Donald Trump called his wife ugly, claimed his dad was somehow involved in the Kennedy assassination. Also had the Inquirer run some article that his wife was sleeping around on him, if I recall correctly, or he was sleeping around on her. One of the two. Either way, some sort of infidelity red herring. He actually buzzed Ted Cruz's press conference one time during the primaries. I don't know if you guys remember that. The Trump jet came over with full engines and disrupted his conference. And even he looked up and said, you got me, Trump, or something. Called him a pathological liar, all these things. And just to wrap up how much of a shithead he is, at CPAC, while he has an audience, he makes fun of restaurants that are trying to be open. The reason you take your mask off at the table, Ted Cruz, is you can't eat through the mask. So they can only require you to wear the mask when you're clearly not eating, which would be when you're standing. Because assholes that follow Donald Trump would fight a server that tried to tell them to put their mask on while they're sitting down at the table. That's why that exists. And if you think masks are virtue signaling while all these people have died, it's a real tragedy. I don't know it as a fact, but Kelly Fusto says that he has an ongoing high fatality rate in his district. Is Texas split, or is the whole state his district, like in Kansas?
The whole state.
Yeah, that's every state, right?
The whole state.
I just have to bring up one thing. I'm dying to talk about it.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
The golden statue of Donald Trump.
Oh, God. Has everyone seen it? I could probably find it real quick.
I mean, that's...
Somebody hadn't seen it the other day.
Seriously, that says it all. I wanted to bring it up when we started talking about minimum wage, because at the same time, they're debating minimum wage. They're standing and giving a press conference around a golden statue of Donald Trump. They're not qualified to have the conversation about minimum wage in the first place because they don't care about people's living standards. They just want to get behind Donald Trump. And we talked about it before. It's not even really about Donald Trump. He's just a symbol that is about, taking so much attention away from what's really going on and putting it on this guy that they can continue to take millions of dollars. That first relief package, $100 million, couple $100 million missing. We know where that money went. It went into pockets of friends of frickin' Trump and politicians. The people are dying and starving and need that money. And they're going to debate about, minimum wage and stand around a golden statue of Donald Trump.
I'm going to show it here in a second, Jeff.
People have lost their minds because of this whole thing. I mean, if they're willing to create a statue of gold of Donald Trump.
I'd like to say something.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to play that. I'm going to show this, and it's Tim. I'm not trying to cut you off. I want to layer this on top of what you just said. In the biblical story of Moses and God and the Ten Commandments, when Moses goes up and the people stay at the bottom of the mountain, and Moses goes up and deals with God or whatever, and then comes down with these commandments. They wait forever, and they're waiting and they're waiting and they're waiting. And while they're there, they melt all their gold down and they build this golden calf. The critical part of this story, historically and archaeologically, is to recognize that this myth, that is the golden calf myth, revolves around a time when agriculture was burgeoning. And the god was the god of the calf because they were farming and they were raising food, and people had their hands on a plan that they wanted, and so they didn't need God anymore. They had this plan. So literally, the idea of a golden calf is when you take your hope for something better away, you take your belief that things can get better, and you hunker down to what is, to the ultimate affair. And so this is a visualization. This is the biggest, greatest thing these people can come up with which is what makes this so sad, scary, and dangerous, is because when we see this kind of thing, and we recognize that in the brain stem of folks right now, who, and Monument says it earlier, he says, yet the majority voted 45 in. The fact is that when we vote, we're not voting with all of our brain. We're not maybe even voting with the part of the brain that argues politics on a Sunday night. We're coming in with a different part of our brain that's dealing with fear. And for some people, this visualization appeases their fear. And that's the only difference. Meanwhile, the Democrats are in a different stratosphere of governing. I really wish there was a Republican Party that was in place that had cognizant fucking leaders who could think and could take some criticism once in a while and lose and not try to kill our government. And they haven't just done that in this country to the nation. They've done this in Wisconsin. When they lost the governorship in Wisconsin, they tried to vote that the new governor wouldn't have any power. This is the way they operate. They're political terrorists. They're lost in idolatry about Donald Trump and jingoism and Americanism.
Yeah. They are. I mean, it's obvious, and of course, people are posing in front of this kneeling. I guess just to troll us, right? I'm sure it's not them really wanting to kneel to him. I think there's a couple of really interesting things about this. I hadn't really paid enough attention to this statue before. If you saw me laughing to myself, first thing I'd like to point out is him in flip flops. I'm not sure we've ever seen Donald Trump in flip flops. Second of all, he's got a magic wand, which makes him some type of fairy, I would say.
Oh,
I
love it.
Third thing I think is hilarious is you notice he's still not reading the fucking Constitution.
Right.
It's facing us, not him. So he's using it the way he always does, which as a tool, not as a guide to his behavior.
As a prop. Yep.
Yeah. It's pretty incredible. Now, the artist does say that he made this in retaliation to the other, like the inflatable baby Trump and other things that were picking on him, other art that was picking on him. But
the artist makes it, but once the artist releases it, it becomes everyone else's art, right? And so
true.
It's what has been said about it and what have people done with that piece of art is they've adored it. Like it's God, and then it's given them the ability to really lean into this. What I found funny today was, it happened and I didn't see it. Trump spoke, and Jimmy Carter probably spoke too somewhere, but he's a former president just like Trump. I don't give a shit.
It's funny you bring up Jimmy Carter, by the way. Why do people think on March 4th we're going to have the 17th president and it would be Donald Trump? Why wouldn't it be Jimmy Carter? The oldest living, the longest ago elected president, or Joe Biden, the most recently elected president. Why would we go back to some whatever bullshit they have in their mind? Why would it pick Trump? Right. That doesn't make any sense. If we broke it that long ago, wouldn't we go back to the most long ago elected president, or wouldn't we have to have a new election, or wouldn't we take the current president and make him? I think it should be Obama. President? I mean, whatever. I mean, the point is, I don't see why you'd pick Trump. I mean, he's not the current president. He's not the oldest. He's not the longest in the past elected president.
You know what we could do? We could have an election between, if that happens, let's have an election between all the former presidents and Joe Biden, and see who wins.
Well, right, because obviously Obama could run again because he was never president, because they would have nullified his presidency. Yeah.
And if Clinton runs, then that someone would go and find those Epstein tapes that everyone knows are about with everybody in town. And
we just run a super ticket. It would be like Obama and Bush or something, just to fucking get rid of Trump. Just something crazy. Bush would make a great vice president. Bush. I don't mind me to idolize the guy, but compared to Trump, I wish we'd had Bush again. And I hated Bush when he was president. I know Zach hates when I do that. I'm sorry, Zach. Okay, we'd have a super ticket, which would be Biden Obama. How about that?
Wait,
go back to Biden Obama. We go back to Biden Obama. How's that? That's a good ticket. Or do what I think we'd probably say, why don't we just keep the ones that just got elected if we're going to go back to 17th president? Anyway, I don't understand why suddenly you have this massive reset, and then of course Trump would be the person. I mean, what parliamentarian would? Well, if you had made a mistake in your election, any kind of a mistake in your election, you just suddenly all of a sudden, whoops. that election was invalid. You don't just pick a guy. That's been their problem since the get-go. They've been trying to say all these things are illegal with the election. I've said it from day one. What do you do even if you're right? Even if you were right, and there was blah, 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 illegal ballots, blah, 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 blah. The ballot shouldn't have been accepted by mail, let's just say. Well, how do you go back and redo it? How do you go back and redo it January 6th? You guys are talking nonsense. None of it makes any sense. You can't retroactively just undo it, because what, of course, they all wanted was, well, that just has to be invalidated, so then Trump just stays. No, it very clearly says Trump has to leave, as he did. You have to have an election to have a new president. You can't just have a president retained because you claim the election. I mean, it's just exhausting. It's like your logic doesn't even work the way you've written it. The story you've written doesn't fucking work.
I guarantee that once March 4th happens, and obviously Biden will stay in power, the new narrative will be April 30th, because that's when Washington had his inauguration day.
Sure,
so Trump
right.
it's going to be just like that. Trump is.
I've already heard guys on Scope. I'm going to jump in while he's hung up for a second. I've already heard guys on Scope saying it doesn't look like Biden. His face doesn't look right. You hung up for a second, Zach. I've already heard guys on Scope saying it doesn't look like Biden. His face doesn't look right. Go back and look at old ones. I don't know who it is. They say it's just like, are you guys have got to be the most ridiculous. These people are just looking for anything. They're just looking for anything. I'm so glad I ditched my MAGA friend. Could not be happier that we stopped talking when he claimed the insurrection. He was sending me, I told you guys, he was sending mugshots of other people claiming they were news pictures down one side, mugshots of somebody completely different. Oh, they found the guy and it turns out he's a Democrat or whatever. It's like, it's not even the same person. Like, it's just, they'll just suck down anything that works. Whoever this Sullivan cat is, he was obviously an anarchist. So what? That's one person that was an anarchist that was there. That hardly defines a mob when you find one person that used to be an Antifa.
That one person also has strong connections to the Boogaloo Boys, right?
He does. So it's like, yeah. I mean, let's be honest. There's going to be, I'm sure if you really dig into it, you'd find a lot of anarchists in the group that have unknown political, I'm sure. But you also have people with Trump flags yelling, let's hang Mike Pence. I mean, it's obvious who the crowd was.
The Republican Party hates the government of the United States. The Republican Party wants to end the United States of America based on their belief that the worst thing that you can have is a federal government. So what they did with the soft sell with Bush tried to do it with Obama, with the Grover Norquist types, they tried to choke the government out. So they were like, when we're in power, we're going to spend all the money we want to spend. And then when the Democrats are in power, we're going to go full austerity and we're going to choke this government out and we'll kill it that way. Well, that didn't work. They'll try that again. That's what they try to do. But let's not be mistaken in the fact that they said their piece when they took on those steps. This is our thing. We're taking our government. This is not the United. They don't want Congress. They don't believe in democracy. They want a fascist dictator system with basically feudal corporate lords that you choose who you want to be your boss, and then you live according to whatever governance structure they have. That's literally what they want. And to imprison anybody who asks questions and pisses you off.
They want the divorce model. That was, I believe, Model C in what we read the last week. Yep. They want the divorce model where states control everything, and if you're in a red state, you make your own calls. And the blue states can just go to hell. That's what they want. They want to separate themselves legally, at least from a decision structure. Mm-hmm. So yeah, they want the federal government destroyed. Then they want states' rights so they can oppress people in their states. Quite frankly.
And don't destroy the boardrooms because we're going to split those down the middle and share the tables.
If anybody missed last week, you should go back and watch the part about the divorce. It's quite entertaining. I actually got out beers because it was that was much fun.
It was fun. I mean, but it's so outlandish because it was at least one attempt at someone saying, "Here's what we really want," and it's not to stay united.
Nope.
When I was watching your guys' segment last week on that specific topic, I was thinking to myself how I will not see any of those kind of flags. Like the most I'll see is a Trump flag. In the area I live, I mean, my district went to Bernie Sanders in the primaries, right? So I live in a very, very progressive area in the San Francisco Bay Area. Yeah. So it's really interesting for me to hear like this is like you won't find that. I mean, the Republicans and Trump supporters are somewhat, they like actually actively are shamed here. If you don't wear a mask, you're actively shamed in public for not wearing a mask in this area. But, you know, it's just a really interesting cultural difference between.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so living in Boulder County, Colorado, which is one of the bluest counties in the country, going into Weld County, Colorado, which is next door, which is one of the reddest in the West. That's why I lifted that up last week, because just driving across the county line, it was like, oh shit, look what's going on in Weld County, man. They want a divorce. And so that's why it was such a stark thing. And then I think for Tim, we were identifying for you that it's basically when you hit a certain part of the burbs that you started seeing that stuff. It wasn't inner city Chicago, but it was more of the burbs.
It's that's a really good point, because it is right as you come into my burb, Park Ridge, which is pretty white actually, and so it's like that's also part of it, because Chicago is pretty liberal, you know, but outside of Chicago, like Park Ridge is not. It's Republican.
Well, Mike Pompeo laid it down on his last day that, and it's why the transgender issue is such a great pushback of a first move on the chessboard, is because it will be long forgotten by the time we get done with the Biden administration. But when Pompeo says that, you know, our greatest weakness is multiculturalism and, you know, inclusivity, like that's our biggest sin, our brokenness is that. And it's like, dude, that's our greatest strength.
Yeah.
Is our diversity and our people. And we need more people in this country. I mean, we've got a lot of things that we need to assess and adapt to. One thing that I do know is that historically, after every single pandemic, there are massive cultural changes that occur. About a year or two after people get back to normal, there's finally things where people are like, oh, and that, let's fucking change that too. You know, it just kind of happens.
Telecommuting will be so much more common after, I mean, everybody's already committed to that. A lot of offices have shut down. They're like, we don't need an office anymore. We're getting all of our work done, and you guys can do it from home.
I think things like street fairs and free concerts and stuff like that are just going to like set all kinds of new records, you know, because like I've been saying, it's like, you know, how many times, you know, before the pandemic, you know, did somebody that you haven't seen in 2 years say like, hey, I'm down the street at the bar, you know, it's 11 o'clock. You're like, no, man, you know, I'm in for the night or whatever. And like, no one's going to be saying no for the next few years. And so, you know, things like free street fairs and stuff where you can just go and walk, like we have one called Open Streets ICT where they close the main street through Wichita for like 8 miles, and you can just walk up and down the street, and all the stores are like giving away hot dogs, and the cops are there giving out bike helmets and whatever, you know. And like that thing, I predict the first year that's like really a go, it's going to be like massive, because everyone's going to be like, it's so great to finally be able to go out and see people. And yeah, I predict there'll be a lot of changes, a lot more social times. I predict a lot more people out on the porches and everyone taking walks and talking to each other. Although I've noticed a little bit of that now, like in my neighborhood, I had my dog tied out front for a few months. So I could sit on my porch with my dog and talk to the neighbors as they walk by, because obviously that's safe. One of my favorite pictures, by the way, of Trump I have pulled up if you want to flash that one. This one I think should be on the dollar bill here. Trump saluting the North Korean general. This is a high point for me. Yeah. Such a dumbass that this guy, I think, just paused and got Trump to salute, and then he just reached out his hand. So the general is trying to shake his hand, and he's saluting him. And the general even knows he can't salute Donald Trump. But Donald Trump doesn't know he shouldn't salute a North Korean general. And look at the face on Un in the background. He's just like, my fucking God. He fucking did it.
He's just like, I can't believe he did it.
Look at the guy in the middle back. Look at the smile on his face. That is a North Korean official. That's the biggest smile he's ever had in his life, that guy in the middle back. That is the high point of his entire life, smiling that Donald Trump just saluted a North Korean general. And, you know, this guy's, can you even imagine?
Kim Jong-un is shocked in that.
Imagine if a Democrat did this. People would have lost their. Remember when was it Obama forgot to salute one time, or salute with a cup of coffee or something? They tore him apart. I mean, that was a pilot on Marine One. This is this is an adversarial general.
Ronald Reagan started that saluting shit. They shouldn't be saluting. The president shouldn't salute anyone. He's a citizen. He's a civilian leader. Ronald Reagan started the salute thing. Obama was, Joe should end it. but that's just my opinion. I'm old
Yeah.
school on some of that shit. The president of the United States should not be saluting anyone.
No, they should be saluting him, and then they should.
Yes.
Yeah.
They salute the civilian. That's the power of the military that works under a civilian. That's why it's, but this all this jingoism and war bullshit.
Stolen valor from a guy who dodged the draft, saluting a North Korean general.
Oh.
How these people, they've become everything they said they hate. They've become everything they said they hate. They worship a draft dodger who saluted a North Korean general. I mean, we could go down the list. It's forever long. Unfaithful, a sexual assault. And now they have a chance. They have a chance to get out from under this bag of shit. I get that he's popular. I do. But they've had a chance, and they can't do it. They just can't pull the trigger and say it's time to dump him.
Well, they have a somewhat credible fear of never winning a primary. I mean, say what you want about Trump's base, but they're loud and they're very active. So
that's fine. But you've of course also got, we got to keep in mind, I mean, you're talking about, you've got Ted Cruz, Mitch McConnell. These guys get interviewed every day on the news. They're active political figures. So yeah, you got Donald Trump who can beg his way back onto Fox News after he's fucked them over, after they worshipped him for 3.5 years, screwed them over at the end. I assume they won't want to have him back on. I mean, the point is, I don't know. I mean, you just don't even make the play because he might not be successful, and his base just replaces all of them? I mean, obviously that's the calculus, but man, that's just terrible. And so you keep sucking up to an unethical, amoral guy. And people still, I mean, tonight I was in an argument on someone's Facebook page and someone said, best president ever. Donald Trump was the best president ever. It's mind-blowing. It's just mind-blowing.
I finally realized the strategy behind claiming that the election was stolen, because as long as he never admits that the election wasn't stolen, anybody who supports Donald Trump, of course, has to continue supporting him because he never lost. The election was stolen, so you're still riding with your candidate. And that was the whole strategy.
It allowed you to stay in the bubble. Yeah.
And now they can pass a bunch of voter suppression laws. There's something, 240 voter suppression laws, Zach, and 43 states coming through?
Yeah, I don't know the specific number of how many laws are going through, but you can see a lot, especially in Georgia. They have a whole list of all these different voter suppression laws. And let's be very clear, they're trying to stop the black vote. That's what they are doing.
Obviously.
So
we should be able to get guns just on credit, just on your word. But to vote, you need 4 forms of ID and a bill and everything else, right? You shouldn't make someone wait to get a gun. Everyone should be able to have a gun. No one should be able to restrict your right to get a gun. But voting, we're going to need a blood sample and something in triplicate and blah blah blah. I mean, it's just
And yet, if you because of the COVID-19 virus, over the course of this year, now you can purchase a home. You can go through one of the largest lifetime decisions, financial moves that you've ever made in your life. You can literally purchase the home, sign the papers, set up the escrow and the taxes, go through the entire thing with a real estate attorney, and do all of that online, never sitting in a room with people, for hundreds of thousands of dollars, $700,000, $800,000, $900,000, $1 million homes.
Right.
But you can't vote digitally.
Right. Or you shouldn't vote by mail, where you get all your tax documents, where you get your driver's license that you're now using as your identification to vote. Yeah. But that same system isn't viable enough to mail in ballots.
Wait. I can get a passport online.
Yeah.
Right. I can. You know what I mean? Like, if you just could break it back and think about all the things you can do online that the government is totally good with. Paying my taxes online. Somehow there's not a lot of hanky-panky going on in that situation.
By the way, I would think the reason the paper is such a better idea is because a paper ballot is a physical thing. When they talk about hacking ballots, just imagine if we had all voted digitally. I mean, there would have already been a civil war. They would have said all of our ballots were changed while they were in the internets. They're already claiming somehow it was hacked. You guys have seen this Mike Lindell thing where he's got all these IP addresses and all these arches and stuff. It's just complete and total nonsense. Nothing was being transported by IP. Even if someone was electronically sending numbers, I'm sure they were separately. I'm sure that the number they were sending was in the subject line of the email.
Mike needs to say no to crack.
He does. He says he's a former. I don't know if you saw Hal the other day. Mike Lindell on one show said he's a former recovered crack addict.
Former recovered.
I remember when I quit for a bit.
Yeah, remember that time I was recovered. And again, drug addiction is serious, and I'm glad he recovered. But he clearly has some chemical imbalances he needs to get focused on.
Yeah, I mean, in that picture of him outside the White House, you can just hear him thinking, it's a bad day to have quit smoking crack.
Picked the wrong day to quit. He all his paperwork. It was literally about insurrection,
Yep. Yeah, it was like whatever, invoke the whatever martial law. God.
Wow.
And do what? For how long? I mean, how long? What are you going to do? Just keep people from their toilet paper? That ain't going to work, man. We figured that out. People need that toilet paper, and they will go to get.
There's got to be some secret hero in there that we're going to find out about later. Somebody, maybe it's even my least favorite person on earth, Stephen Miller. Somebody is going to have gone to Donald Trump and said, you can't do any of that crap. It's over. You just can't do that crap. It'll fail. It's got a 95% chance of failing, and when it does, you will go straight to Leavenworth prison. You will be incarcerated for the rest of your life. Do not try that crap if you're not willing to play a 95% chance of going to federal prison for the rest of your life. Somebody we owe a big favor that just said, no. You can't do that, Donald. Because he was saying, I'm going to do it.
I just want to say that if Donald Trump does go on the campaign trail again, I just keep having these really old-timey images in my head of bringing like some rotten fruit with me, and I just want to throw rotten fruit at Donald Trump on his next campaign trail.
He'll only do his hate rallies.
Yeah, didn't you hear in one of his last time he ran, he was like, supposedly there's people in here with tomatoes they're going to throw at me. If you see somebody with a tomato, just punch them right in the face. Yep. So be aware. He's already trained his people to punch you in the face when they see a tomato. So bring oranges or something. He won't even. You probably they can't even see oranges. The Trump voters.
At CPAC today, one of the first things Trump started doing was attacking Biden on immigration. Has Biden done? I mean, there's a few things that I'm actually angry with Biden over in regards to immigration. But how much has Biden actually done? Trump made it sound like Biden implemented an entire new immigration platform and has it active right now in less than a month,
Right.
Yeah.
That would be phenomenal. That would be like groundbreaking governance.
All he did was announce that, he wants to make changes and put it as an issue to talk about. Like doing that early on in a presidency rather than later on means that it might actually get on the docket, right? That's all I know that he did.
Well, I know one thing he did was he said that separating babies from moms is bad, and we're not going to do that anymore. Right. I mean, that was big immigration reform right there at the border.
He did stop the wall on day one. That's true.
Yeah, and this is a point that I like making, where a lot of Republicans and Trumpers blindly follow everything Trump says. So even though there's disagreement between us at certain times over how much dissent over Biden is, at least there's factions on the left that actually dissent and disagree with Joe Biden. It's not this monolithic, Joe Biden is our God. We listen to every single thing he says. He's always right.
Right.
It's a really good point.
Oh, totally, dude's coming off the rails. 70% tax rate, huh?
Good.
You understand? Good. You understand progressive tax brackets, totally, dude.
Good, dude. We need 70% taxes.
I love it. You don't want.
And I hope he lets in 300,000 a year. I hope he lets in 5 caravans a year.
You don't want to see Jeff Bezos pay 70% income tax. That's crazy. Make private health illegal. No. What's private health? My privates are very healthy.
Drop the mic on that one.
Yeah. I love it. Know us. We've got him flustered now.
He's coming back. He's got more.
He's flustered. Anyway, he can reload. Night. By the way, this is a good opportunity. I did have one housekeeping thing I want to talk about. I tend to kind of take the moderator stance. I try to be the guy that's watching Periscope, and if I'm the third guy to see it, I might mute it. We've got some really good admins in here. What I want to say is, let's just say Totally Dude now starts yelling out dummy or something. We, as the people in the comments, our friends, you can't. If you start yelling dummy at him, then now we've got two people yelling dummy in the audience. You understand? Just if a troll comes in and they want to get louder and troll, I have no problem with you guys asking a question like, what do you mean? How's that possible? That doesn't make sense. That's fine. But if someone starts calling names, don't call them names back, because then I'm just sitting here looking at two people calling names, and of course I'm going to mute the guy who started a fight. But come on, everybody, like just let the trolls say their things. We'll, let the moderates mute them. Sometimes there's some name calling from our side, and we just, let the new guy come in and yell and make noise. It'll be all right. Government can't run the DMV. In Kansas, the DMV is run by a third party, just FYI.
I have a house cleaning issue. It's not really house cleaning, but I just want to say hi, Zach.
Yeah.
It's our
Oh,
first time
shit,
all
I'm
together,
sorry.
and I'm a fan. I love your comments, bro, and it's really cool to be in here with you. So,
Oh, yeah, you hadn't been on the show with him yet, had you?
No.
Yeah,
So,
I was thinking that when you joined. I really enjoy hearing your commentary too.
Thanks, bro.
Yeah, you guys
My
both.
bad.
No, you guys
Not at
definitely
all,
both
man.
bring
got
a
it.
great viewpoint. It's so good. It's so good.
What are you itching to? What are Zach? I know you speak for the entire left.
Yeah.
What?
Tell us. You
what
guys
are
had a meeting
itching-
yesterday, right?
What are you itching to see on the agenda post the $1.9 trillion COVID thing? What are you wanting to hear about this summer?
I've heard a lot about a potential gun reform act or bill that Biden might be sponsoring, and that's important to me. I think a lot of younger Americans, Gen Z, millennials, we really want to see gun reform, and I think generally gun reform polls really well. So I'm hoping that Biden will really take the next step when it comes to that. Me personally, every single school I've been to, from elementary school to high school, had some kind of lockdown due to gun threats, active shootings. So it's a really
Say
big
that
problem.
again, please. Please say that again.
Wow.
Every single school I've been to, from elementary school to high school, has had at least one lockdown due to gun threats or active shootings.
Wow. That's
So
real.
this is a problem in our country. Not every school ends up like Parkland, and we're lucky for that. But so many students, so many kids end up in a situation where they're in lockdown because there was a gunshot a block away, or they're in lockdown because someone on social media posted that they were going to shoot up the school. There's this constant mindset. And, in school, we are trained to protect ourselves from active shooters in the same way we're trained to escape school from a fire. Right? That's become a everyday part of a student's lives. I guarantee you could probably ask a student while they're at school and say, what would you do if there was an active shooter right now in this classroom? And they're going to have a whole game plan for exactly what they're going to do. That's wrong.
It is
And so
wrong.
I'm very hopeful that Joe Biden will do something to start to address this issue.
At my daughter's school, they call it something different. They call it Code Yellow or something. So they do Code Yellow drills, but I don't think anyone's told them what that code would be called for. But it's go down the street to the church. There's a big church a block down. So, and I think they might also have that for their fire plan, but that's definitely the middle school has the same plan. They go to the same church. So
my son's high school had to evacuate from a bomb threat last year to the nearby church because that was the only place that could hold everybody.
Yeah, I think the idea is like if it could be snowing, it could be 20 degrees. You have to have a place, and I think you also don't want to have all the kids just standing outside with whatever.
Yeah, because I watched a whole bunch of fucking sophomores just run through the woods sideways. I'm sure they went and played video games all day. I mean, you just can't have a high school just run out into the field for very long because they're not going to stick around.
That's right. No, it is. Now, Zach, I assume did you have any fatalities in any of your schools, or they were all sort of warning shutdown things?
They were all warning shutdown things. One of the times was a threat. One of the times was just a social media threat. One time, I guess there was a fatality, but it was like a block away from school, and this was when I was in elementary school. So no students were hurt, but there was a shooting right near the school, so that put us into lockdown.
Jeff and Tim.
Yeah,
maybe the comment of the night.
Right.
People afraid of an extra bathroom at their kid's school, but not afraid of the shooters.
Yeah, I had to respond to that one too. Truth. That is true.
What we need is potty police. I've said it for a long time. Apparently, these people wanted potty police in public schools to stand outside the bathrooms and decide if a kid is what gender they are. It's all kind of a head scratcher.
But they're not in favor of metal detectors at the doors to make sure kids aren't bringing in, firearms in their backpack.
Restricting access to AR-15s. No. We don't need to do that. But let's make sure little transgender boys aren't going to the bathroom with little straight girls or whatever.
So have you seen some of the panic on the right about this beginning of these bills that are I think coming from the House side at this point, looking at banning every kind of shotgun, looking at banning all kinds of clips, all these different things. Have you seen some of the panic propaganda out there from the right? Any of you guys?
A little bit.
Anytime there's even a change in any administration, one of the things I loathe about the NRA is they immediately start this hype campaign, and it's like so subtle and incendiary, and it's just like they're gonna take your guns, they're gonna come for them, and so it's just try to get people to go buy some more guns, just so they have that sense of security that they got it before the government took away their right to. And the government's not going to take away your right to own a gun. It's just, we might restrict what kind of guns, but it's not going to happen. They're not going to take away your right to own a gun.
You know what I find really ridiculous is that everyone has generally accepted that we need to jump through hoops and do a bunch of tests and regulations to get a driver's license. But when it comes to guns, that's off the table. We can't take a test. You can't prove that you are adequate with a firearm. You can't have any safety measures involved. It makes absolute no sense, especially considering you're going to be using a car far more often, right?
Unless you want to hunt, and then you're required to take a class. So you can own a gun real easy. If you want to go hunt, you have to take a class, which I've taken, by the way, and it's a decent class. So why isn't hunting licensing required for all gun ownership? Right. I mean, how hard would that be? It just doesn't seem like a big deal to me, or at least for a certain type of gun.
Did you guys ever shoot guns or bows and arrows in PE class in school?
I think we did bows and arrows.
We did bows and arrows every year.
We definitely did in Boy Scouts. I did both bows and arrows and .22s.
I knew Zach was gonna. There you go. You got some archery over here.
Yeah, we shot .22s in Boy Scout camp.
Yeah, wow. I don't think we ever did it in PE class.
I got time off of school for hunting season when I was in grade school. They were still giving kids time off for hunting season because that's just what was happening. It's like
Erica saying she did archery in gym class. I think we did.
We did it. I know we did it.
But you're talking about like really weak straight bows, and like they had it pretty well.
Yeah, and it's outside, and there's a bale of hay, and but there was always some dumb shit in the class who's like, "Hey, man," and you're like, "Dude," and then he'd get kicked out.
Yeah, someone shoots one up or something,
Yeah, exactly. You're like, "Thanks," and everybody runs.
I remember being in my neighborhood as a kid, and the kid took his bow and arrow with the target arrow, just literally shot it straight up.
Jeez.
The closest thing. The closest thing I can think to that is there was like a wilderness elective where students got to make their own bows, but the bows couldn't have the bows had like a marshmallow at the end, and there was no like sharp tip. I cannot imagine any school that allowed you to do this.
We had a shop class. They'd make crossbows, and they'd bring them home on the public bus. There were crossbow, no arrows. There were no arrows involved. Like it was designed to use like a classic target shooting arrow. So there were no arrows allowed, but they all get on the bus with these crossbows. And we're talking steel bow, wooden stock, like full on medieval crossbow. Braided cable.
You got to get it home. You got to get it home somehow.
Like nowadays, I would hope if you did a project like that. First of all, I don't think you could do a project like that. If you did a project like that, you'd be like, your parents have to come pick it up. You know what I mean? Someone has to come down here and pick it up.
Your shop teacher would turn you in, and then you'd have to have an interview with the member from Homeland Security.
No, this was fine. Everyone understands this wasn't a prison project. This was a design. This was a 6-week project. This wasn't something they milked under their counter. This was the class project.
It's a shiv. We're making shivs in class today.
Crossbow,
Next week
like,
we're gonna make crossbows.
I mean, a crossbow's about as powerful as you get below a gun.
Good
Oh my God.
Lord.
Yeah,
Well,
they'd all be riding.
technically, arrows for crossbows are called bolts. Just a
Yep.
technical
Well, I know, but I
piece of
think
information there.
Target arrow. I could be wrong. I don't think they were.
Crazy.
I don't think they designed bolts or anything. It was crazy. Yeah. Maybe they're supposed to come home unstrung too, but of course everyone just immediately strings them while they're sitting in the bus. But yeah, that was a different time. Crossbows on a bus. Can you guys even imagine that?
Well,
No.
that's, I mean, so that, you know, you can go philosophical and all this bullshit, but the truth of it is like there was an approach of education in those days that was all about the formation of the children of the town. Right. And so we wanted the children of the town to have all kinds of experiences. And the community used to pay for the children of the town to have PE classes and music classes and band and art classes and a library. And, you know, now in a lot of school systems, if you want to have an extracurricular activity, it's a full tilt. You pay for a private experience for this dance class or this archery club or this thing, and everybody lives in their own private little bubble. And so we specify our own children with what they want to be successful in or whatever, but it's a much more limited approach than the breadth of just having community options where every kid was, you know, all right, well, today we're going to shoot archery. And then, you know, next week we're going to do friggin' tumbling. I mean, I broke my collarbone in 6th grade because I couldn't jump and tuck 6 kids. I could do 5 at full speed running and then jump somersault, but I couldn't do 6, Jeff.
Right.
And I went straight in the fucking ground. And of course, coach comes over and he's like, pushing on it. Yeah, I don't know. I'm crying. And he's like, yeah, that looks like that's terrible. So you should probably just go sit down.
Poke again. That's
Poke.
terrible, boy.
Go sit down.
One
Not even
more
go to the
time.
nurse. Not even go to the nurse. Go sit down. See if it still hurts in 10 minutes. That'll be a bad sign.
Exactly what it was.
God.
Amazing.
It's a different, you know, but it was like, part of it is we want these people to be able to stand on their own 2 feet when they're done. And we've lost that approach in our pedagogy and the way we approach education. In a lot of ways, we've privatized everything. Everything's competition from the first day. It's not a matter of going, man, I'd love to have a whole class of smart people rather than there's our 2 successful and the rest of them are, you know, ditch diggers, which is where we are.
Yep.
Well, and I have to think there's a huge change. I think the biggest change in our society is the prevalence of, again, bigotry or hate, where people are being taught that other people have less value than them. You know, even when you really dislike somebody, even when you're prejudiced against them, when we were kids, people weren't trying to generally hurt each other or invalidate each other. We live in a time now where someone's been bullied and they get angry and they decide that all those people, everybody, the bully and the people that stood by while I was getting bullied, all of them are worthless, and I'm gonna go make a difference. You know, I'm gonna go get my revenge. Or I think that the value on the individual has disappeared very quickly over the last maybe 40 years. You know, there should definitely be a feeling that, you know, you'd stop and help your enemy if they were injured. You know, there's a huge difference between being mad at a guy because he's bullied you at the bus stop and you know, watching somebody hurt him. You know, that those 2 things are very, very different. Or more importantly, you know, they're walking down a highway in freezing cold weather where their life is at risk, and yeah, they're the guy that bullied you in high school, but you'd probably stop if their life was in danger. Now, if they just had to walk a mile to the gas station, I'd probably enjoy watching that. But the point being, you know, even your enemy has value, you know, and I think that's been lost. I think that's an old school belief now. And I don't know how we get it back. I don't know how we teach these extreme MAGAs that a Bernie bro is a valuable person, just like they are. As much as we dislike these MAGA guys, they're still people, and they have their normal intrinsic human value. You know, every now and then as a kid, I used to stop and think, you know, you hear about a combat death or something, and you'd go, man, you know, that one guy that died today in Iraq, that guy had a family, he had hopes and dreams, a mother, a brother, whatever, you know, all these people, everyone he went to high school with. You know, every single death is just such a tragedy. And in America, I think that's what Black Lives Matter was trying to focus on, was all these black men die every year in America, and it just goes by like a blip. You know, everyone just, 30,000 black men died this year to violent crime. Well, how is that not a complete and total tragedy that we're losing a small town in America every year? And it's just because we've just become inane to it. Certain people in the society think, well, they're involved in violent crime because they've chosen to be a counterculture, and so they kind of get what they deserve. And everyone's just written it off in their different brackets in their mind, and it's all just tragic and terrible. All those deaths are horrible. All of them are tragic. It doesn't matter who. It doesn't even matter. It really honestly doesn't matter if they're a gang member who had already murdered 2 rival gang member people. He's still a human. That is a tragedy that he's dead. He was violent and he should have been serving. He should have been served justice. But that doesn't make him subhuman.
Yeah, and speaking about Black Lives Matter, the reason why White Lives Matter, that slogan, doesn't make sense is because our society and us as people already know that white lives matter. That's an intrinsic value in our society. The reason why Black Lives Matter is a phrase that needs to be said is our society does not treat Black lives like they matter.
Sure, but I think that hate, unfortunately, we're now seeing cross across historical lines of I think the hate that has allowed the blind eye to be turned to inner city Black crime, I just feel like we're on the verge of that same blind eye being turned. Oh, well, yeah, 3 rioters were killed in Portland, but they were Antifas. I can imagine that comment being made. I mean, we're crossing into these areas that I just think are really, really dangerous, where we're devaluing our opponents, and we need to be careful we're not doing it too. Because
we have to recognize this is a critical issue. Yeah. The Holocaust Memorial in San Francisco, up at the Legion of Honor up there. It's not a huge Holocaust memorial, but it's a very powerful image and a very powerful sculpture. But one of the things that I always remember about that experience of seeing that a few years ago was in the placard that's on it, that's talking about that we remember the victims of the Holocaust, and it goes through all the countries and all the different people. But it says, and we will never forget both the perpetrators of the murder and the cruel apathy that allowed it.
That's right.
And and it's essentially that the idea of cruel apathy being equated with the murders means it's the same piece. And so the cruel apathy is something we might not see Holocaust happening with our eyes, but if you look around and you see the conditions in society where cruel apathy exists, then some crazy shit's going on. And I'm part of it too. I mean, humanizing my neighbor, I want to, it's a lot easier to just hate and draw lines, red and blue. But that has to be a practice that somehow we shift out of, or we lose a society. That's the end of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well put. Yeah. Cruel apathy is a good way to put it.
I think it's an interesting term, the idea, because it's a tolerance of brutal cruelty, and then just the pure indifference of meh.
It actually gets worse, because we actually have people that, for example, when Colin Kaepernick says a system is set up against a certain group of Americans, there's actually people that tell him to shut up. So beyond cruel apathy, you actually have active consent.
Mm.
And you have people that, by the way, I posted this on my Facebook wall the other day. There are people to this day that hate Colin Kaepernick for not standing for the national anthem, and everybody else who didn't stand for the national anthem, that have never watched his original 15-minute statement. They're still pissed. They still call him whatever names they want to call him, and they still don't know why he did it. And you know why? Because they want to hate him. They don't want to understand him. They enjoy hating him. That's the facts. That's the facts. They want to hate him.
That's the addiction.
Yep.
That's the addictive process.
That's the first thing I ask somebody when they say those athletes should fucking stand. Have you watched Colin Kaepernick's original speech, 15 minutes in front of his locker, where they asked him why he was doing it? No, I don't need to see that. Blah 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 blah. Oh, so you're happy in your ignorance. You're happy with your ignorance.
Yeah.
And by the way, Cliff's notes: he was raised as a white suburban kid and got a gun pulled on him in college for helping a teammate move. So he has a really good viewpoint on this issue. I know I've been through that once before, but Cliff's notes for the audience. Cliff's notes for the audience. So he has a pretty powerful story to tell, and maybe you should listen to it, and maybe you'd at least say, "Well, I don't agree with them, but okay." Anyway, yeah, willfully ignorant is right, and they enjoy it, and their cognitive dissonance won't allow them to listen to it. They don't want to hear a compelling story. They're happy with the story they have.
and that gleeful pig and shit kind of willful ignorance that they have with that smile on their face. You see it on some of these periscopes. Then they can comment on your personality defects or whatever they want to, because
Yeah.
what you're talking about doesn't fit into the world that
Right.
they're in.
Right. I love to just blow their mind with, you realize the flag isn't worth anything. The flag is a symbol.
Right.
I go, you realize that in America, freedom of speech is so much more powerful than the flag, that you can actually burn the flag if you feel you need to express yourself.
Yep.
So the flag isn't more important than even an opinion. The flag is literally proven to be less important legally than your opinion. Now, I don't think you should burn a flag. I think burning a flag in protest is ignorant and childish. But you have the right, because freedom of speech is so important.
And a lot of these are the same people who will fly the Confederate flag, which was like, it makes no sense. Or the Nazi flag, like America's sworn enemies, Confederates and Nazis, and they will wave those flags, but then get mad at Colin Kaepernick for kneeling.
Right.
So here's a question that I would like to lift up in this piece. I saw about a week ago or so that 100-year-old, I believe there was a 98-year-old woman and a 100-year-old man were both sent off from the United States to face trial in Germany for war crimes because they were part of the Holocaust. 100 years old.
Yeah, I saw the headline. I didn't read the story.
It took me a second to think about it, and I was like, wow, 100-year-old person, they're going to do that. And then, again, it took me 1 second, and then I was like, fuck yeah, they're going to send him back there and send him to trial. Do you know why? Because the Nazis are our enemies. And if you walk on a mine in France right now and blow your leg off or die because of it, the cause of death in the current day is still called World War II on your death certificate. It says you died because of World War II. World War II is still happening for people who are Holocaust victims and Holocaust perpetrators. And the right in America, I do not believe, has the patriotism to send that 100-year-old person back. I think they would be soft on Nazis. I think they would coddle the Confederacy. I don't think they would have the courage to do what we did with Arlington National Cemetery, which is, if you didn't know this is a piece of trivia. Arlington National Cemetery is Robert E. Lee's plantation. And when the Civil War ended, they took his land and they planted American dead troops on it and said, remember this, fuckers. And that's basically what the American way was, just to say, we're not down with this. We beat you. But yet we have the right-wing folks in our country who are insurgent terrorists threatening our country. Our capital right now is still under lockdown because we have insurgent terrorists threatening our government, saying that it's going to overthrow the government on March 4th.
That's what I was going to say earlier when you made your comment about Antifa becoming, the next targets. It's like that already happened, because when they were defending the attack on the Capitol, the first thing they did was said, well, look at the riots that happened all summer, and look at the cities that were burned, and look at all of the destruction.
Look at Portland and Seattle.
Yeah, exactly. So they immediately turned it against Antifa, and not Antifa, but honest protesters.
7%. That is the amount of protests that turned violent. And violence is described as anything from a fight, Marty and Jeff punching each other, to a Target burning down. So that's 7%. That means 93% of all of the protests didn't even have a physical fight.
Right.
How are you trying to say that that is anywhere in comparison to what happened on January 6th? And even if we're going to talk about the 7%, I don't believe there was a single instance in that 7% of invading the Capitol. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I just missed the biggest news story of the summer, but there was not a single instance of insurrection. So
that's right.
I just lost it, unfortunately. I saw it on TikTok, and I just confirmed it. We were talking about the Confederate flag. Minnesota has a Virginia battle flag, which is the Stars and Bars. And Virginia's been asking it back for years, and Minnesota keeps saying, we won the war, we took the flag home, it's ours, it's our heritage.
Yep. We beat your ass.
You wanted it. You shouldn't have dropped it at Gettysburg.
Yep.
Blood was literally the Attorney General said our blood was shed to get that flag. It's ours now.
See, Diddy Ice, it's good to see you. It's been a long
Yeah.
time, and he's right that there were instances of damaging federal property, but the difference between damaging federal property and aiming to hang Nancy Pelosi and kill Mike Pence is just it's in such a different ball game, and that's the scary piece, is that for this lunatic fringe anti-American Republican right, they don't have anywhere to go now because they've given up every bit of logic, the whole step down. That now they're just threatening. They're just the kid. They're just the bully who's just like, "Well, I'm gonna fight you all, man," and they're just standing in the street and they just got beat up because they just lost, and nobody wants to talk to them anymore. And it sucks to be you, but because that's what's up, man. It sucks.
I don't have time to paint the picture of the urban core, but let's just imagine you've been shit on your whole fucking life, and one day a cop shoots your friend for nothing. You might burn down the Target store in your neighborhood, mightn't you? Versus getting together for the second Million MAGA March and deciding it's time to break into the Capitol. Not inspired by anger, grief, 400 years of oppression, but just my guy didn't win. It's a huge difference between a Target store getting burnt to the ground and a club gathering and deciding that they're going to stop the operation of the Congress. So the best part is the conservatives again have become everything they say they hate. You know, everything that they say they hate. We don't riot. We don't loot. Kelly McEnany's got a great quote. When we lose, if we lost, we won't fight. We won't riot. We won't loot. We won't burn anything down. And instead, they literally disrupted the Capitol, erected a gallows out front, claiming they wanted to hang the vice president. One of them was so motivated that they resisted a cop's directions and got shot dead on the spot. That's who conservatives are. Now, do some anarchists or some inner city disadvantaged people get upset when one of their people gets shot by a cop for no reason? Yeah, and if you don't think the suburbanites would do the same thing, I don't think you're paying attention. And that's socioeconomic, not political. No one was carrying any Biden flags in any of those riots, were they? So you got to kind of look beyond the screen. You got to look past what the conservative media is telling you. And when the cops put out something like "we can't protect you" to scare people, that there's this mob violence, mob rule. The only mob rule I've seen lately was the Trump mob that stopped our Congress. So that's my 2 cents. And if someone shoots your friend in suburban white America, I'll be really surprised if you don't march. And these days, I'd be very surprised if something doesn't get burnt or broken.
Yep.
You know, what I've noticed over the conservatives over the past few months is that they have truly embodied the delicate snowflake.
Yeah.
That's what they've become.
Yeah.
I mean,
everything they say they hate. We've gotten thick skin over the last 4 years, and they can't take that their president led an insurrection. They can't.
Oh my God, we've built walls of endurance.
I heard someone complain today. There's a wall around the White House now. Yeah, it was erected by Trump, and it stays up because Republicans have proven they'll break through doors to try and stop the function of our government. I mean, what are you talking about?
Now let's stop here for a quick second and recognize too. I've seen a few articles over the past few days recognizing that this is with all of this militarization based on the threats is really a move that is causing people to name that DC statehood needs to occur because they need to be able to defend themselves as a state.
Yeah, that's a good
They need
point.
to have an attorney general as a state. They need to be able to take care of business as a state. And I'm really excited to think that, again, that was on the top of all of our lists before the election when we were thinking about what would we like to see. That process change of having another state be DC would be a balance of power shift. And I think if it can be handled the right way, needs to be a primary piece of Biden's work in the next 2 years with this Congress.
Agreed.
I mean, if you get DC statehood, then Manchin almost becomes irrelevant, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Now,
Or
that
future.
But I think Manchin kind of realizes that, so part of me wonders, is Manchin going to obstruct this so he can keep his own relevancy and power within Congress?
I could be wrong, but something like creating a state, I would assume that's going to have a long timeline. Like, I have to assume DC wouldn't just become a state like New Year's next year. Like, I assume to become a state, you're going to have to do all kinds of elections. You're going to have to build state level government, a Capitol building. I mean, call me crazy. I would assume it's like a 3 or 4 year timeline. I mean, I could be wrong. So the Senate's going to change its makeup in 2 years. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't.
Well,
logic says Manchin won't have his same
what they could
position
do is
in 2 years.
get it begun and then send it off to the states to be ratified.
The point is, I think it's going to take longer than Manchin's coveting of his position could. That would be extremely short sighted for him. Now, in my mind, because by the time it's even halfway through, he'll not likely be the pivotal person. Either there'll be more Democrats or more Republicans, and he'll be off the hot seat. In my 2 cents. And by the way, we went through it really fast. I don't condone any illegal actions. I don't believe in illegal assembly. I don't believe in illegal destruction of personal property. I don't believe in destruction of commercial property. I don't believe in destruction of public property. I wouldn't participate in any of those activities. I wouldn't go to the Capitol to break through windows. I wouldn't go to downtown Minnesota and stand there while they're flipping over cars. I don't believe in any of that stuff. And I would argue one was actually a political event, and the others are not. The others are a community event. It just so happens those communities tend to vote blue, but even the areas that they happen in, I don't know, Minneapolis, it's not 95% blue, is it? I mean, I don't know. So it wasn't even one political party involved. So I don't know. I just find
that whiny retort of, yeah, but what about the protests?
What about the whole country burn last year?
Is a false equivocation that the protests were somehow wrong.
Mm-hmm. Right. To Zach's point, most of them were peaceful.
And whether they were peaceful or not, back to the ethic of what's right, people couldn't not protest. They literally, their guts, their bellies forced them out of their houses to go walk in the streets and go, this is over. I can't stand this anymore. Yeah. And it rose up out of people. And when the founders wrote the Constitution, they understood that about human nature. This isn't the first rodeo that people have been through. They know that when truth needs to occur, you cannot get in the way of the will of the people. It will not work. It's an inalienable right to stand up and speak my piece when something's gone wrong. Try to stop it, and you'll see the ramifications. Well, now you stoke it with a bunch of lies, and then you get a bunch of really privileged white people, whole bunch of cops and real estate developers and real estate agents and other semi-employed people in January. And you tell them they're going to make a difference. You tell them they're going to be part of history. You tell them at the event, we're going to march to save our country.
Right. Yep. It's time to act. Literally, it's time to act, they say.
So,
or we won't have a country anymore.
Sad period that we're in because we don't have an honest debate happening with the right.
No.
Cycling back to Ted Cruz, there's a statement that he made once, and he said, "I will believe in climate change when Texas freezes over."
I believe that's a false tweet. It's funny, but I think it's a false tweet. I don't think that tweet actually exists.
Not sure about that.
He said he made some disparaging comment about climate change, but it wasn't when Texas freezes over. It's something close. It's close to reality, but I believe that original tweet is fake.
What we know, however,
because my wife is extremely liberal, and she said that's the fake tweet. So I'm only verifying with my wife.
What we know is that their response hasn't gotten smarter. Their response in the last week and a half has not gotten smarter. They just got the state of Texas just got destroyed, like in a war zone, from 10 degrees below zero, and it's probably going to happen again. And I don't know when. They're talking about it happening again sometime.
Well, and I don't think Elena's in here, but I mean, you have to stop and think about it. So they lost electricity. I didn't think about it all the way down. I didn't think about how bad the whole situation was. First thing that happened is I have a buddy who is in Dallas. So what do you do when your house gets cold? You start running water. If you're smart, if you've ever been in a cold environment, and by running water, you open your taps a little bit. Zach, this is for you Californians that don't even see freezing temperatures. You start running water because your pipes, especially like your kitchen sink, the pipe goes up the outside wall and then goes down your sink. And so when your house just starts to get, say, to 40, your pipes against that wall will be below freezing. And what happens is the pressure in the line, when the pipe breaks, it immediately starts to leak water. And as that water starts to flow, it melts a little more of the ice, and pretty soon you got a bunch of running water under your sink, and you're in deep shit. Yep. So what people were doing is they were running their water, okay? Well, that's a problem because in the middle of the winter, you're running a bunch of water. So the system wasn't designed. I'm sure they weren't quite ready for that much water to start flowing. Then the water treatment plants lost their pumps because they didn't have power. So now the water's not flowing. So now every pipe breaks. And when I say every pipe, based on where you are in the country, your pipes are buried to what they call the what's it called? It's not the permafrost line, but similar to that.
Frost line. Yeah.
The frost line. You're right. It's called the frost line. So like, I think up north of here, it's like 3 feet. I would guess here in Wichita, it's like 2 feet. That the ground just generally won't freeze below about 2-3 feet down. In California, it's on top of the ground. They can just lay the pipes on the ground.
Yeah.
They just run them under the sidewalks. That's all they have to do. Anyway, the point is, in Texas, I assume it's like a foot. I assume they don't get very, very deep at all. Keeping in mind, too, that even when it is seriously cold, water is usually flowing through those pipes. They don't actually have to be frost-proof because the flow of water will naturally keep them warm, depending on the source. So when all that stuff stopped, when all those systems stopped, not only did pipes break in every freaking building, but they had to break huge number of places through the entire pipeline. I mean, I'm no genius, but I'm guessing there's going to be huge regional outages for a long time.
Yep.
Because you have to, if it's broken in the ground, you have to go out and dig it up and put a new pipe in, and you got to go in all these schools.
Wait for the sinkhole to show up and go, oh, it's broken here too, and
go in all these schools and all these houses. Now, by the way, once your pipes stop breaking, you just got to shut your water off. I mean, you go to your main shut off and shut your water off. I mean, it's over. You've lost. But which I've seen videos of people walking through their house, water's like come raining down the ceiling. It's like you haven't shut your water off yet. Like you're screwed. Turn the water off.
No, it's crazy. And to see the drains that froze shut, so there was nowhere for the water to go. But those were choices that were made politically. Those were decisions that were made and are going to and have already been continued to be made. The Governor Abbott down there, first thing they do is blame Democrats. They're like, well, I suppose this is going to be something for climate change or a Green New Deal or whatever.
That's the other thing. First thing he said was Green New Deal. I mean, instead of it's a tragedy, we've got a real problem. Green New Deal.
Well, Jeff, I mean, Biden is the greatest president in history. Within 1 month, he enacted the Green New Deal. He completed immigration reform. He gave rights to every single human being on earth. I mean, according to the Republicans, Biden is the best president and most effective president we've ever seen on earth, right?
Exactly.
Right.
No. Well, I think it's about time to wrap it up. We've been going a couple hours, and I appreciate everybody being here tonight. Thank you for continuing to support us here on America Heals. Again, sorry we missed on Thursday night last week. Just being a human being, ran out of energy, and it turned out to be an interesting night. I did for a while. I was able to watch your scope on Thursday, Jeff. It's good to see you up.
I fell into a great time slot. Ironically, I had similar numbers to what we usually have. It was
there you go.
I ended up being on for 2 hours. I'm like, this is ridiculous. I came on here to just tell all of our viewers the show isn't dead. We just missed this week, and we just ended up having a show, basically. So,
yeah, it won't happen very often, but sometimes humanity sets in, and sometimes it's a good thing, kind of like we were saying earlier, to have some new stuff going on. So.
Oh yeah, and I think everyone understands. No one's being paid or anything. If something comes up, we're gonna have to drop the show.
Right. No, it's good. But Zach, I really appreciate you being here on short notice, man.
Good to see you, Zach.
Yeah, man. It was good to
and
talk
Tim,
to
good to see you.
It's always
Thanks
good
for
being
here tonight.
Good to see you guys.
Awesome. All right, everybody, we're going to shut her down. Thanks for tonight. Be safe. Get your vaccine if you can, because life is better on the other side of this thing. And rock and roll, y'all. See you soon. See you Thursday.
Peace.
Tim, see you next Sunday. All right.
All right, brothers.
Peace now.